starting with 1 million luck points. Chapter 341, 10,000 Spear Technique. Before coming to the elite base at the 13th Spatial Rift this time, she had already decided that she was going to challenge President Zhou. She didn't care even if he was a lot stronger than her. It was not because of anything else, but because she wanted to resolve the depression in her heart. Yes, I was given the spear. Zhou was very helpless. This woman was indeed as Heavenly King Zhou had said. Humph, the Black Dragon Spear is the king of all spears. A person with poor marksmanship is not worthy of possessing it. Take your Black Dragon Spear and we'll go out and fight. I want to see if you have the qualifications to possess the Black Dragon Spear. After Bai Linglong finished speaking, Zhou felt like his head was about to explode. What was going on? The moment they met, the other party challenged him without even saying anything else. At this moment, Zhou was also incomparably depressed. He had long expected this. However, this girl's temper was very stubborn and he could not persuade her. Moreover, it was just a competition and it was not a big deal. Moreover, despite the other party's superior strength, Zhou was not worried that President Zhou would hurt her. In the end, he decided that he and President Zhou could just play along with her. There's no need for a competition. I admit defeat. Zhou did not want to fight her. It was not that he did not dare to, but there was no need. The two of them were comrades from the same camp. Although competition was also very common in the military camp, Zhou still did not want to fight her. If you don't want to compete with me, then you have to admit that you're afraid of me. President Zhou, I've heard that you are a bold and ambitious person, invincible in the world. In front of the Grand Array, you are well known for your heroism and you can even hold back 10,000 enemies alone. So why is it that you're afraid of accepting my challenge? Could it be that you're looking down on me just because I'm a woman? Bai Linglong's words directly provoked Zhou, making him very depressed. Alright, let's compete then. Zhou only had to agree. The two of them arrived at the center of the 13th Spatial Rift one after another. After all, a battle at their level was not a fight between children. Moreover, the defensive line had just been established at the front line. If the two of them affected the defensive line during their battle, it would be over. Moreover, this 13th Spatial Rift belonged to the humans now. At this moment, all the quasi-heaven realm experts and supernatural experts of the foreign race had left to avoid the two of them. Zhou did not follow. After all, he felt that it was not a big deal and decided to leave them alone. Don't overdo it. Miss Bai. Also, try to go easy on me. My spear technique is still not perfect, Zhou said with a smile. Humph, what a glib tongue. You better look out for my spear. Bai Linglong immediately snorted and took out a shining white spear. She was dressed in white armor and held a white spear. In this world, she was like a white snow lotus, holy and stunning. The spear in her hand created countless sparks and was incomparably powerful. Zhou was surprised after just taking one look. Good spear technique. Zhou knew that he was no match for such a spear technique. However, Bai Linglong's spear technique was also perfect for Zhou to practice. Therefore, he did not hesitate to take out the Black Dragon Spear. Lightning filled the sky as the two directly fought. The two of them instantly exchanged blows, and booms sounded out incessantly. They were competing and did not want to kill each other, so they both held back. However, it was still obvious that although Bai Linglong's spear technique was exquisite, her strength was inferior to Zhou's. In a head-on collision, she was no match for him. Although Zhou's combat strength was powerful, his spear techniques were inferior, and Bai Linglong was still able to keep up. However, this was only a competition. If it was a real battle, Zhou would have already used the god-slaying cultivation technique to instantly kill Bai Linglong. After all, the title of the best quasi-heaven realm expert was not for nothing. Booms constantly sounded, causing noises in this space. The more the two of them fought, the more valiant and carefree they became. As Zhou Hao fought, he tried to imitate Bai Linglong's spear technique. As for Bai Linglong, she had also relied on Zhou Hao's strength to train her spear technique. At this moment, the two of them were both benefiting from each other and started to fight even more happily. However, they did not know that they were getting closer and closer to the center of the 13th spatial rift, which contained many spatial fluctuations. The two of them were already immersed in the battle and did not care at all. Not far away, a spatial rift became larger and larger, devouring the other spatial rifts. A suction force had already spread out. President Zhou, your spear technique is indeed lacking. Let's see how you deal with this move. Bai Linglong held a spear and had a heroic aura. After she finished speaking, endless spear tips appeared behind her, carrying a terrifying strength. 10,000 spear technique. Countless spear lights exploded with a bang. Zhou Hao looked at this powerful attack and nodded. Very strong. Although my spear technique is not good, my saber technique is not bad. Since ancient times, weapon techniques have always been interchangeable. Today, I will use my spear to activate my saber technique to break your 10,000 spear technique. Chapter 342, You're really naive. Shadow 7 Sabers. As soon as he finished speaking, spear light also appeared in the sky. But at this moment, Zhou Hao seemed to have sensed something. His expression immediately changed. He saw a huge spatial wormhole appear behind Bai Linglong. As the destructive power of the two spear lights tore through space, the spatial wormhole became even more unstable. Immediately, a powerful suction force erupted. In the next second, before Zhou Hao and Bai Linglong could react, the suction force enveloped them. The two of them were directly sucked in. This suction force directly pulled them into the wormhole. The spatial strangulation force also instantly tore through everything. The armor on Bai Linglong's body instantly shattered, and countless wounds appeared on her body. She cried out in pain and gasped several times. Bai Linglong's face was livid, and her lips were pale. Just as she was about to lose to the pressure brought by this space, she suddenly felt a domineering force instantly pull her back. Soon, Bai Linglong felt the tearing force around her weaken by more than half. She looked up in surprise and saw that President Zhou had already embraced her. He was using his body to block a majority of the sharp pressure. Bai Linglong's expression changed. She subconsciously wanted to push President Zhou away, but she felt that the strength on Zhou Hao's arm did not decrease but increased instead, firmly imprisoning her in his arms. If you don't want to die, then stay put. Otherwise, your armor will be destroyed and you won't be able to resist the power of the spatial strangulation. In less than 5 minutes, you will be torn into pieces. Bai Linglong gritted her teeth. No matter how unwilling she was, she had to admit that President Zhou was right. The armor on her body was already tattered, revealing her snow-white skin. Moreover, countless wounds had already appeared on her body due to the spatial power, and blood was flowing out. A large portion of Bai Linglong's clothes had even been torn. It was actually quite awkward for President Zhou to see the other party like this. In addition, she was tightly embraced by Zhou Hao, their skin touching. This made Bai Linglong feel ashamed and furious, but she was also helpless. At this moment, if she wanted to live, she could only listen to Zhou Hao. After all, she was indeed unable to withstand this strength on her own. However, even so, Bai Linglong was still displeased. She shouted coldly with a displeased expression. You better not look around rashly. Otherwise, even if it costs me my life, I won't let you off easy. Zhou Hao frowned and ignored Bai Linglong. He was in no mood to take advantage of Bai Linglong. The most important thing now was to figure out where this place was as soon as possible and find a safe place for them to temporarily hide before thinking of a way to escape. Half an hour later, this violent tearing force finally calmed down. After Bai Linglong sensed the spatial strangulation power dissipate, she immediately pushed Zhou far away and hid at the side, looking at President Zhou vigilantly. Woo! Unexpectedly, just as Bai Linglong pushed Zhou away, a large area of the wounds on her body was immediately torn open. Blood surged and kept flowing out, making Bai Linglong's breathing anxious and uneasy. In particular, a large portion of her clothes had been torn, leaving only a few pieces of cloth that barely covered her sensitive areas. Zhou did not even look at Bai Linglong. Instead, he supported his body with difficulty and sat on the ground, scanning his surroundings vigilantly. There was a gentle breeze and flowing streams. In the distance, there were tall mountains and flowing water, as well as large numbers of willow trees. I didn't expect such a paradise to exist. I guess I've had an eye-opener today. Zhou could not help but sigh repeatedly. He did not expect Bai Linglong to find his words especially sarcastic. Paradise? Hehe, you're really naive. Bai Linglong's words immediately attracted Zhou's gaze. He immediately looked at Bai Linglong curiously and could not help but ask, then what is this place? Sensing Zhou's gaze landing on her, Bai Linglong immediately felt somewhat uncomfortable. Her pretty face was pale, and her lips were pale. Intense pain would come from the wounds on her body from time to time, causing her to gasp in pain and have a dispirited expression. In addition, her clothes were not covering everything on her body and she looked somewhat disheveled, making her face flush red. She hurriedly turned her head away. If I'm not wrong, we probably got sucked into a spatial wormhole. Which means that we're currently in the abyss of sin. Bai Linglong panted heavily and shook her head. Chapter 343, Abyss of Sin? The Abyss of Sin. Zhou was shocked. He thought to himself that a place with such a name must be a land of great danger. I heard from others that the Abyss of Sin is one of the forbidden areas where the foreign races imprison their spatial prisoners. This place looks no different from the outside world, but it's actually just an illusion created by the foreign races. Anyone who comes here will have all their signals blocked, making it impossible for them to contact the outside world. Even their cultivation will be suppressed and they won't be able to use it. Anyone who is exiled here will have to experience all 4 seasons in a day. They have to endure wind, snow, and rain until their cultivation is exhausted. After that, they will die. Bai Linglong's face was pale. After speaking tiredly, she closed her eyes in despair and fell to the ground. Zhou's face was trembling as he frowned. He did not expect them to accidentally enter such a land of death. If they did not find a way out as soon as possible, wouldn't they also be tortured to death like those spatial prisoners? Then we have to think of a way to get out as soon as possible. Zhou hurriedly said, but he saw Bai Linglong sighed and shook her head in despair. This is one of the spatial forbidden areas. The people imprisoned here are all extremely evil and sinful criminals of the foreign races. There's only a way in and no way out. I'm afraid we'll die here. After Bai Linglong finished sobbing, she hugged her legs tightly and buried her face in them, sobbing softly. No matter how strong Bai Linglong was, she was still a girl. When she encountered danger, she would still be afraid and helpless. Zhou felt that such a Bai Linglong was even more pitiful. In his eyes, she was now like a girl who just wanted to be loved. The sinners of the abyss of sin have to experience the pain of the cold wind and the burning of the heat. All in a single day. Not to mention the pain of lightning and thunder and the pressure of the heavy snow and rain. This cycle will also be repeated day after day. No one can persist until they find a way out. Bai Linglong had already fallen completely into despair. It had to be known that if she could still rely on her cultivation, she might be able to use a spatial teleportation technique to escape from this place. But now, all her cultivation had been suppressed. She had no way of escaping. In addition, her armor had been completely destroyed when she entered just now. In the sin of abyss, she might not even be able to last for 3 days. Looks like we are destined to turn into bones here today. Bai Linglong slowly closed her eyes in despair, and 2 clear tears flowed down her face. My fate is up to me. No matter what, I have to find a way to leave this place. Zhou slowly stood up and looked into the distance like an eagle, his eyes filled with determination. Seeing Zhou like this, Bai Linglong was stunned and could not help but look at him a few more times. At this moment, Zhou's back actually appeared tall. At this moment, Zhou did not know what Bai Linglong was thinking. He only retracted his gaze indifferently and quickly scanned his surroundings. Although this was a forbidden area for exiled criminals, the surrounding environment was still not bad. Mountains and rivers overlapped with each other, making it look somewhat scenic. Zhou looked around and quickly found some medicinal herbs that could stop Bai Linglong's bleeding. He threw it into his mouth and chewed for a moment before walking to Bai Linglong's side, prepared to help her treat her wound. What are you doing? Bai Linglong looked at Zhou vigilantly, as if he was her mortal enemy. I'm stopping your bleeding. Do you want to die from blood loss? Zhou's words made Bai Linglong sneer. She could not help but shout coldly and question, we're already in danger and doomed. Why do you have to do such a useless thing? It's better for you to wait for death obediently. It'll be easier for you. Bai Linglong was certain that their final outcome would be death. She believed that they would be buried in the abyss of sin and be devoured until their bones vanished. Chapter 344, Can't Wait for Death. However, Zhou had a firm expression as he looked at Bai Linglong and said solemnly, if you give up before you even try, then I'm afraid even the Zenith Heaven Divine Immortal won't be able to save you. Zhou did not force Bai Linglong to treat her wound. Instead, he placed the hemostatic herbs he had just picked in front of her. This is a hemostatic plant. You choose what you want to do with it. It's better if you make that decision yourself. Zhou understood that if they did not try, they would never be able to leave this place. However, even if they failed, it was still better than them sitting here and doing nothing, right? Therefore, only by trying could they create a miracle. A moment later, Bai Linglong seemed to have figured it out herself. She threw the medicinal herb Zhou handed her into her mouth and chewed for a moment before applying it to her wound. The cool feeling allowed her to recover a lot. However, soon, a change happened. The originally cloudless sky was instantly filled with dark clouds. The surrounding warmth also suddenly decreased by a lot. A cold wind whistled as it blew towards Bai Linglong and Zhou, as if it was threatening to freeze their blood. Damn, looks like the snowstorm is coming. Zhou's expression changed as he immediately walked to Bai Linglong's side. He held her hand and quickly ran towards a small cave in the distance. Bai Linglong had finally recovered a little of her physical strength. However, now that Zhou was holding her hand and running forward, she felt that her legs were weakening again and she could fall at any moment. Soon, Zhou hid in the cave with Bai Linglong. Although the cave was not big, it was still more than enough to resist the cold wind. Even though the wind and frost had been halved, Bai Linglong was still trembling. Her breathing had begun to become hurried, as if the blood in her entire body had been frozen at this moment. Zhou looked at the trembling Bai Linglong and immediately asked, if you don't want to die, come over. If we hug each other, we might be able to warm up a little. However, don't misunderstand. I don't mean to force you. If you're unwilling, then forget it. Zhou was only making a suggestion. After all, he didn't mind either way. His armor was still intact, but Bai Linglong was in a different situation. The armor on her body was already shattered to pieces, and most of her clothes had also torn apart, revealing her skin that was like fine jade. If there were no obstacles and she was exposed to the outside wind, Bai Linglong would probably freeze to death before the snowstorm even arrived. Bai Linglong was indeed frozen by this bone-piercing chill until her teeth chattered, and she was unable to say anything. Her face was red. After hesitating for a long time, she stood up and walked to Zhou's side, burrowing into his arms to warm herself. However, Bai Linglong did not relax. She was still extremely nervous and paid attention to Zhou Hao's movements at all times to prevent him from suddenly taking advantage of her. Zhou Hao seemed to have seen through Bai Linglong's thoughts. He snorted and said, "Miss Bai, you don't have to worry. I'm a gentleman, so I naturally won't take advantage of you." After Zhou Hao finished speaking, he did not say anything else. Instead, he hugged Bai Linglong tightly and closed his eyes, waiting for the snowstorm to descend. Bai Linglong subconsciously thought that they would definitely die today and would not be able to escape. However, if there was really a chance of them surviving, Bai Linglong was still willing to give it a try. After all, who would want to die young in such a place? Soon, with a sharp wind sound, a snowstorm quickly descended. Bai Linglong clearly felt that the temperature in the surrounding air seemed to have decreased by dozens of degrees. However, even in Zhou Hao's arms, she still felt the sharp coldness, making it impossible for her to calm down. Just as Bai Linglong felt that her breathing was starting to become weak and that her entire body was about to freeze. The snowstorm gradually became weaker and then disappeared. Fortunately, the snowstorm only lasted for an hour. Otherwise, they would really have frozen to death here. Zhou Hao did not want to sit and wait for death. He planned to make this cave bigger. That way, at the very least, they could resist the invasion of some wind and rain and reduce their suffering. No matter how much Bai Linglong disliked Zhou Hao, she had no choice but to take the initiative to help him. She was also extremely embarrassed after being hugged by him. Soon, the two of them widened the cave. Zhou Hao found some branches and piled them in the cave as backup. Then, he picked a few fruits from the surrounding trees. This way, when they got hungry, they could even fill their stomachs. Zhou Hao lit the branch and looked at the steaming fire. He felt a little better after sensing the warmth. We still have to think about how to leave this damn place as soon as possible. Zhou Hao looked at Bai Linglong solemnly. During this period of time, he had tried to contact the outside world every once in a while, but he failed every time. The signal here was completely blocked, so there was no chance for him to send any messages out or contact the outside world. Chapter 345, The Depressed Zhou Hao. Since the purpose of the Abyss of Sin was to exile those sinful foreign races, there would naturally be no escape routes for them to escape. The space here was sealed and there was a strange force that could block their cultivation technique and all the signals. They were unable to contact the outside world at all. Moreover, there was only an entrance here and no exits. Even Zhou Hao did not know how he could leave at this moment. Although he could not leave now, Mirongxun was still here. Thus, Zhou Hao asked Mirongxun with his divine sense if he had a way out. Mirongxun was experienced after all. As an expert of the heaven realm, he had succeeded in escaping many dangerous situations in the past. The only solution now is to look for an exit. However, there's no exit here at all. If we want to get out, we need a teleportation array. Ask this girl if there's a teleportation portal. If there is, we might have a chance. After Mirongxun finished speaking, Zhou Hao immediately asked. Bai Linglong, do you have a teleportation array formation? If you do, I think we have a chance to get out. Zhou Hao still chose to believe Mirongxun. After all, if he died, Mirongxun would also die. In fact, Mirongxun's urge to leave this place was even stronger than Zhou Hao's. Bai Linglong was stunned for a moment. She did not know why President Zhou was still talking about this at this moment. President Zhou, have you forgotten that our cultivation is currently obstructed here? We can't release any heaven and earth essence energy. Let alone communicate with the array formation, I can't even open my backpack. How can we leave? Bai Linglong frowned and could not help but say. Zhou Hao naturally understood. He looked at Bai Linglong and smiled. He could not help but say, if there's a teleportation array formation in your backpack, I'll have a way to get us out. Hearing this, Bai Linglong's expression changed for a moment. She could not believe it and could not help but say, do you really have a way? Could it be that you have the ability to recover our cultivation? In fact, Zhou did not know what to do. However, since Mirongsun had said so, there would naturally be a way. Therefore, he nodded solemnly. There's a way. Miss Bai, trust me. Bai Linglong was overjoyed and said directly, all right, I do in fact have a spatial teleportation array in my backpack. If you can restore our cultivation, we can use it to get out of here and return to the 13th spatial rift. Zhou was very happy and could not wait to ask Mirongxian what he could do. Hehe, I do have an idea. However, I'm not sure if you are willing to give it a try. Mirongxian said with a mischievous smile. Nonsense. If there's a way now, of course I want to try it. Tell me, what is it? Zhou hurriedly asked. Well, of course I know that you are willing to try. However, I'm not sure if Miss Bai is willing to help you. You should ask her first. Mirongsun said directly. Only then did Zhou look at Bai Linglong. I have a way to get out, but I need your help. Miss Bai, are you willing to help me? Bai Linglong was naturally willing. After all, she did not want to die in this place. Therefore, she agreed without hesitation. President Zhou, as long as you can get out, just give the order. After only a few days of contact, Bai Linglong still trusted President Zhou. After all, this man had saved her life. If not for him, she would have died after entering the spatial wormhole. Moreover, when the cold arrived, he was the one who protected her and warmed her up. Although she was furious at the thought of him hugging her when she was wearing ragged clothes, she still trusted him. She just felt that it was a pity since she had never even touched another man's hand before this. She was really embarrassed and furious. All right, since you've agreed, things will be easy. Zhou did not know what she was thinking. Seeing that she agreed, he immediately communicated with Mirongsun. All right, since she agreed, I'll tell you about this method. The essence energy in this world is only one type of energy. There's also other types of energy, such as the more mysterious yin-yang energy. As a heaven realm genius, I was able to come into contact with this energy. In fact, this energy is even closer to the world's energy source. Although it's hard for me to admit this cultivation technique has existed before the global mutation. In other words, before the global mutation, there was already a cultivation technique that could create energy stronger than the essence energy in this world. After saying this, Zhou was immediately surprised and in disbelief. What? You're saying that we humans can cultivate before the global mutation? Zhou was somewhat shocked. He had always thought that only humans could cultivate after the global mutation. However, he did not expect that humans could cultivate before this. Of course, just because you didn't know about it, it doesn't mean that other people are ignorant of this fact too. The history of the human race is simply too long. A lot of things could have happened without us knowing about it. Even as a heaven realm expert, I still can't say that I have fully grasped the situation. I'm sure it's the same for the other experts of this world too. However, I still have to tell you that this cultivation technique does indeed exist. The power of yin and yang can be condensed by dual cultivation. After Mirongsun finished speaking, Zhou was dumbfounded on the spot. What the heck? Yin-yang dual cultivation? Damn! Zhou was immediately at a loss of words. Why was this the same as the plots in the novels? Do you think I'm lying to you? It's really like this. The aura in a man's danshan comes with yang aura, and the aura in a woman's danshan comes with yin aura. Only by harmonizing yin and yang energy can one condense this yin and yang power. Do you think the stories about yin and yang energy that our ancestors passed down are fake? Not to mention that there's even scientific evidence now. It has been proven, you know. Mirongsun said angrily, thinking to himself that Zhou was really too inexperienced. But how am I supposed to talk about this? If I tell Bai Linglong about this yin-yang dual cultivation technique, she'll kill me. Are you trying to get me killed? Zhou was furious. He thought to himself that this old bastard Mirongsun was really evil. No wonder he said just now that Bai Linglong might not be willing to help him. He had never expected that the solution would be something like this. Damn, why would I try to get you killed? Moreover, the yin-yang dual cultivation technique isn't what you think it is. Zhou, you're still too young. Your thoughts are still too shallow. Mirongsun snorted coldly and continued. The yin-yang dual technique is even more mysterious than essence energy. Even though I don't know where it came from, I do know that this yin-yang power is not something you can obtain through intercourse. The energy you obtain through that method will only be evil. My method is the proper method. Zhou's expression softened as he continued to ask. Then tell me how to do it. Otherwise, I really don't know how to tell Bai Linglong this. Chapter 346, Misunderstanding. Mirongsun immediately said, it's very simple. Basically, for this yin-yang dual technique to work, the two of you will need to sense the yang qi and yin qi in your danshan. After that, think of a way to swap them. When the two of you intertwine your palms, yin will enter yang. After the meridians in your four limbs finish one circulation, yang will enter yin. After yet another circulation, you will be able to condense the power of yin and yang. Hearing this, Zhou heaved a sigh of relief and nodded. In that case, that's not too bad. I guess it's not an evil technique after all. Mirongsun smiled and couldn't help but say, you're wrong again. Zhou was stunned for a moment. What do you mean? How am I wrong? Could this technique be an evil technique? Of course not, but it's also not a particularly pure technique. I can tell you that when the yin and yang powers are harmonized, the two of you will still feel a similar feeling despite not having done anything physically. It's natural for the male and the female to be attracted to each other. When the two of you circulate the energy back and forth, I'm afraid your minds will be shaken. Mirongsun chuckled. After he finished speaking, he made Zhou depressed again. To put it bluntly, nothing will happen between them physically. Instead, it will be a mental experience. However, Zhou still heaved a sigh of relief. It was fine as long as it was not physical. As for such a mental experience, Zhou had never experienced it before and did not understand how it felt. I think you should tell her clearly. If she finds out on her own later and doesn't cooperate well, it will easily cause the two of you to be injured by the yin and yang energy. Do you understand? Mirongsun was not lying. If either of them suddenly stopped, it would be a disaster for both of them. At that moment, the eruption of the energy would be enough to break their bodies and cause serious injuries. A sigh. Zhou revealed a depressed expression. Bai Linglong, who was standing at the side, had been looking at Zhou. One moment, she saw that Zhou looked like he was at a loss, and the next moment, she sighed. Although she could not see his appearance, she could still sense that President Zhou was feeling frustrated. President Zhou, what's wrong? What's that solution? Tell me. Bai Linglong was impatient and said directly. Zhou coughed dryly and returned to his senses. He was a little hesitant, but he still said, Miss Bai, the solution I'm about to tell you, it's purely just for us to get out. Don't misunderstand. Also, if you're unwilling, then that's fine too. I definitely won't force you. Zhou was afraid that Bai Linglong would be angry. Therefore, as soon as he opened his mouth, he acted like an old fox and directly took the initiative to make sure the conversation went smoothly. Bai Linglong was puzzled. What did this mean? After all, this was a matter that involved both of them. She was more than willing to put in her share of the work if it meant that they would be able to escape. Why did President Zhou suddenly look like this, as if he was afraid that she would be angry? President Zhou, what are you talking about? As long as we can get out, I'm willing to pay any price. There's no time for us to hesitate. Hurry up and tell me what we should do. Bai Linglong hurriedly revealed her determination, making Zhou Hao even more depressed. After hearing this, Zhou Hao only felt that it was becoming more difficult for him to speak. However, thinking that he could leave, Zhou Hao gritted his teeth and said, "All right, since you want to go out, I'll tell you. This method involves a cultivation technique that I know. This cultivation technique will allow us to recover some of our cultivation. It will be enough for us to communicate with the spatial teleportation array formation. However, this cultivation technique requires our cooperation to work. To be precise, it requires the cooperation of a man and a woman. It is a dual cultivation technique that requires both of our bodies." After Zhou Hao finished speaking, Bai Linglong was stunned for a moment before her face was filled with anger as she shouted, You despicable man! So this was your intention all along. I was wondering why you were so hesitant. You were actually thinking about such a thing. I won't agree to it even if I die." Bai Linglong was furious. She was initially filled with joy and wanted to know how to get out. However, in the end, she was given such a solution. How could she not be furious? Moreover, she had cultivated for so long, so why had she never heard of such a dual cultivation technique? Wasn't this a joke? Did he really think this was a movie? "Miss Bai, you're mistaken. I think you might be overthinking, it's not the solution you're thinking about." Zhou Hao hurriedly explained, cold sweat appearing on his head. How could she explain this? Not to mention Bai Linglong, if Zhou Hao was a woman and a man were to say this to her, he would probably have already slit the other party's throat. Did I think wrongly? Good on you, President Zhou. Could it be that you have some other plan? I really can't tell. You look like a good person, but after all this, it turned out you were still a despicable person all along. You sure put in a lot of effort just to come up with this plan of yours. Bai Linglong's words were very ear-piercing, and Zhou Hao could not stand it anymore. Of course, that was not his original intention. However, he did not expect Bai Linglong to have such thoughts about him. Moreover, she did not even wait for him to finish speaking. "Miss Bai, I think you're mistaken. I'm not interested in you in that way at all. If I wanted to take advantage of you, you wouldn't have a chance to resist. You weren't able to beat me outside, and you're still no match for me here. Whether you admit it or not, you can't stop me from doing anything to you. Also, you're mistaken. I didn't just come up with the plan to get you to sleep with me. I only suggested this method because this method is really effective. Similarly, it's not the dirty thing you think it is. Instead, it's a true cultivation technique." Zhou Hao said coldly with a hint of anger. She could choose not to believe him, but why did she have to slander him? If he was really that kind of person, this Bai Linglong in front of him, who was already in revealing rags and had shiny skin, would have long become his woman. "Humph, President Zhou, cut the crap. I know what you're thinking." Bai Linglong snorted. She did not believe Zhou Hao at all now, no matter what he said. "All right, if you don't agree, then fine. I definitely won't say another word. However, you've misunderstood me. Even though I'm angry at you right now, I still want to tell you that the dual cultivation technique I'm talking about is not what you think at all. Instead, it's a heaven and earth essence energy condensed from the yang and yin energy in our danshan. If you don't believe me, then forget it." After Zhou Hao finished speaking, he sat on the ground and could not be bothered to say anything else. This method was probably not feasible. Therefore, he could only think of another way. After all, Mirongsun had said that if Bai Linglong did not agree, the two of them would not be able to condense the heaven and earth essence energy with the yin-yang energy. After hearing Zhou Hao's words, Bai Linglong fell into deep thought. Chapter 347, Mental Fusion. Bai Linglong always thought that she was an impulsive person. However, surprisingly, after hearing President Zhou's words, she quickly calmed down. President Zhou was indeed right. If he wanted to deal with him, he would have done so long ago. He would not have needed to make up such an obvious lie. Moreover, he also did not look like a fool and was also very powerful. Before this, Bai Linglong even thought that President Zhou was a man who knew how to protect women at critical moments. Although what Zhao Hao just proposed had made her very angry initially, after he explained it clearly, she also felt that it was possible that she had misunderstood. Under usual circumstances, she would directly ignore President Zhou. However, at this moment, if she didn't give it a try, she wouldn't be able to get out. Therefore, she still endured her temper and looked at Zhou Hao and asked, "Was what you said just now true? Was it not what I thought?" Hearing her words, Zhou Hao rolled his eyes at her angrily and said indifferently, "Miss Bai, I've already told you. I don't care if you believe me or not." Bai Linglong was furious and snorted. "Are you the one who should be angry? It's all your fault for not making things clear. You could have just explained it to me. Why did you have to make it sound like that? You could have just said that you wanted to use the yang and yin energy in our bodies. Why did you have to make me misunderstand?" Bai Linglong was also telling the truth. Was this guy crazy? He clearly knew that she would be angry after hearing such a proposal. Couldn't he have used a different method? Zhou Hao was also very depressed. Just now, she was already angry and started blaming him before he even got the chance to finish speaking. "All right, I can't be bothered with you. Tell me, how does this cultivation technique work?" Bai Linglong asked carefully. "All right, I'll tell you the actual operation of this cultivation technique. You will need to condense the yin energy in your danshan, and I will condense the yang energy in my danshan. We'll place our hands together and the two forces will fuse together and circulate in our bodies. After that, we'll be able to condense a trace of cultivation and have a way to summon the spatial teleportation array." Zhou Hao thought for a moment and said. After saying this, Bai Linglong felt fine about it. After all, she didn't mind someone else's heaven and earth essence energy entering her body. When she was injured, someone had also treated her in this way before. As a martial artist, such practice was common. There wouldn't be any special feelings involved. However, Zhou Hao still continued, "However, the special thing about this cultivation technique is that because yin and yang energy complements and attracts each other, it might cause some fluctuations in our minds. Therefore, we have to calm down when the time comes, understand? If we don't calm down, it's very easy for something to go wrong. Not only will we be unable to get out, but we will also be severely injured." Zhou Hao had to tell her about this. Otherwise, if she was not mentally prepared, it would really be over if anything went wrong. Bai Linglong frowned when she heard this. She thought carefully and decided that it wasn't a big deal. After all, without the fusion of the body, it wouldn't be a big deal even if there were mental fluctuations. "All right, but I'll say this first. I'll definitely be able to control myself and not let my spirit fluctuate. As for you, don't mess up. Otherwise, I won't let you off." Bai Linglong snorted and sat cross-legged on the ground. "All right, how do we do this?" When Zhou Hao asked Mirongsun at this moment, this guy laughed for a long time before answering him. Just now, when the two of them were arguing, he kept laughing. "All right, stop laughing. Tell me what to do," Zhou Hao said angrily. His image could be said to have been ruined this time. "It's very simple. I'll teach you the cultivation technique right now." As Mirongsun spoke, a long series of information entered Zhou Hao's head. Zhou Hao did not hide anything and told Bai Linglong how this cultivation technique worked. After hearing this, the latter tried for a long time and discovered that this was really a valid cultivation technique. Only then did she relax. "All right, let's not waste time. Let's begin quickly." Bai Linglong could not wait to escape from this place. The feeling this place gave her was really somewhat oppressive, making her almost unable to withstand it. Zhou Hao sat opposite Bai Linglong and crossed his knees, prepared to mobilize the yang energy in his danshan. Bai Linglong also slowly mobilized the yin energy in her danshan. The next moment, Bai Linglong felt a warm yang energy slowly infuse into her body like flowing water. This feeling made Bai Linglong's breathing suddenly become rushed. She felt as if she was being hugged by a man, and it was so hot that her pretty face turned red. This energy also made Bai Linglong's body somewhat weak. Although Bai Linglong was only sitting opposite Zhou Hao at this moment, she had a strange feeling that she was already being intimate with him. Zhou Hao had yet to sense the yin energy enter his body. When he saw the change in Bai Linglong, he was immediately stunned. Although he had heard Murongxun say that this cultivation technique would cause mental fluctuations, he did not expect such a huge reaction. However, in the next second, Zhou Hao was stunned when he felt the yin energy in his danshan pour into his body. Then, his body heated up. This danshan yin energy surged into his body like a woman's embrace, gentle and soft, extremely tempting. Zhou Hao's breathing also became hurried. He could clearly sense that the yang energy in his danshan was gradually becoming stronger under the effect of the yin energy. Although we were only sitting opposite each other and not doing anything physically, we are still able to feel so intimate when the yin and yang energies are mixed together. Zhou Hao couldn't help but swallow a mouthful of saliva and sigh. Actually, it's no different from that. Thinking of this, Zhou Hao couldn't help but secretly look at Bai Linglong opposite him. He wondered if she would be angry because of this. However, to his surprise, Bai Linglong did not look angry at all. Instead, she seemed to be enjoying it. She closed her eyes tightly, her face turning red, and her breathing became hurried. She bit her lip tightly, as if she was trying her best to endure something. Soon, Bai Linglong retracted her hand. A spatial teleportation formation immediately appeared in front of her, flickering with light. "We can leave now." Bai Linglong felt depressed, but she couldn't lose her temper at Zhou Hao. After all, if she agreed to this, they wouldn't be able to get out at all. Fortunately, she had recovered some of her cultivation now. It was all worth the trouble just now. Chapter 348, Opening the Curtain. After Bai Linglong took out her array formation, a spatial teleportation power finally transmitted from beside the two of them. Then, light sprinkled down, and the two of them directly disappeared. When they reappeared, they had already arrived at the 13th spatial rift. In the 2 days since Zhou Hao and Bai Linglong disappeared, everyone in the 13th spatial rift had been extremely anxious. Heavenly King Zhou was even more so. He knew that Zhou Hao and Bai Linglong had gone out to fight. At first, he did not care much, but after a few hours, he felt that something was wrong. When he came out to take a look, the two of them had long disappeared. At first, although Heavenly King Zhou was worried, he was not in a hurry. However, after an entire day, he completely panicked. President Zhou was a peak quasi-heaven realm expert, the #1 person under the heaven realm. Moreover, Bai Linglong had also disappeared. She was a genius of the Bai family and was also a precious warrior of the human race on planet Earth. The two of them disappearing together had frightened him. Therefore, they hurriedly sent many generals to look around. At this moment, a teleportation space appeared in the sky above the 13th spatial rift, instantly attracting the people who were looking for Zhou Hao and the others. After waiting for the spatial teleportation to end, they heaved a sigh of relief when they saw Zhou Hao and Bai Linglong walk out. "Humph, you're not allowed to tell anyone about this. Otherwise, I won't let you off." Before Bai Linglong came out, she had already changed into a set of armor and covered her entire body tightly. Zhou Hao only curled his lips and did not care. Where did you guys go? I was so worried." With a flash, Heavenly King Zhu's body appeared in front of them. Seeing that Zhou Hao and Bai Linglong were safe and sound, he heaved a sigh of relief. We wandered off as we fought. Uncle Zhu, don't worry." Bai Linglong did not want to say that she had entered the abyss of sin, nor did she want to say that she had spent such a shameful 2 days with President Zhou. Really? Heavenly King Zhou was still in disbelief as he looked at Zhou Hao. Miss Bai is right. Zhou Hao smiled. Since she was unwilling to tell, he naturally wouldn't as well. Heavenly King Zhou, I still have something to do. I'll take my leave first. With that said, Zhou Hao's body flashed and he left. When he reappeared, he had already returned to the 7th training camp. After not being at home for the past 2 days, Su Ling and the others must have been worried sick. Indeed, as soon as he returned to the 7th training camp, he saw Yun Yan, Yuan Cheng and Zhang Yi in Su Ling's room. Aya, don't worry. Zhou Hao is very powerful. How could anything happen to the first place of our 7th training camp? That's right Su Ling, don't worry. I know Zhou Hao. He'll definitely be fine. These people sat around Su Ling and advised her. Su Ling's eyes were red. Clearly, she had just cried. He would let me know in advance every time before he left. Moreover, he had never left for so long. At this moment, Su Ling seemed to have lost all her strength and became a weak little woman. Her appearance was really pitiful. Zhou Hao hurriedly walked into the house. Su Ling, I'm back. Zhou Hao's voice sounded. Everyone was stunned for a moment before their faces lit up. Su Ling was even more so. She suddenly looked up and saw Zhou Hao standing at the door safe and sound. Tears streamed down her face. Then, she pounced over and threw herself into Zhou Hao's arms. Where did you go? How dare you come back now? Do you know that Su Ling is worried sick about you? Yun Yan was furious. Her plump body trembled as she placed her hands on her hips and cursed. On the other hand, Yuan Cheng and Zhang Yi winked at Yun Yan and pulled her out. Hey, why are you guys pulling me? Didn't you guys just say that you would teach him a lesson after he got back? Why are you dragging me away now? What's going on? Yun Yan had a big chest and no brains. At this moment, she still could not tell what was going on. Is your brain clogged like the toilet? Can't you see that they need some privacy? Do you really plan on third-wheeling? Yuan Cheng looked at Yun Yan and couldn't help but say. Zhang Yi also nodded. Yuan Cheng is right. At this moment, let's not disturb them. When we get back, we'll definitely ask Zhou Hao what he's been up to. Zhang Yi smiled and returned to his room. Yun Yan also understood and could not help but snort before returning. At this moment, only Su Ling and Zhou Hao were in the room. At this moment, Zhou Hao hugged Su Ling's trembling delicate body and felt her tears falling uncontrollably. Zhou Hao also felt very upset. Just now, he was still in the abyss of sin and did not know if he could return. At this moment, hugging the woman he loved, Zhou Hao suddenly felt very happy. Su Ling, I miss you so much. Although he had a lot to say, Zhou Hao only said this in the end. He buried his head in Su Ling's hair and smelled her scent. His heart became incomparably gentle. Su Ling hugged Zhou Hao and only felt better after a long while. She stopped crying and looked up at Zhou Hao. This time, she was neither angry nor upset. This was because she knew that if not for special circumstances, Zhou Hao wouldn't have not left for 2 days. Even if he did, he would have notified her first. And his reaction could only mean one thing: he was in danger. She did not want to ask Zhou Hao what had happened. As long as he returned safely, Su Ling would be satisfied. Are you hungry? Su Ling did not say anything else. Instead, she asked Zhou Hao if he was hungry. These 3 simple words made Zhou Hao unable to hold back any longer. He kissed her domineeringly. With such a woman who loved him, what else could he ask for? Zhou Hao was very glad to have met such a woman. After the kiss, Su Ling's pretty face turned red as she pushed Zhou Hao away forcefully. Her voice was pitifully soft. I'll make you something to eat. Also go take a shower. You smell like sweat. With that said, Su Ling disappeared from the room. Zhou Hao smiled. Yang Hui also knew that Zhou Hao had gone missing, but he knew very well who was behind Zhou Hao. Thus, he had his own guesses about where Zhou Hao went. Zhou Hao, although it's not appropriate for me to interfere in your matters, you have to inform me next time, understand? Yang Hui still thought highly of Zhou Hao. He also knew that Zhou Hao might have left with Senior Zhou, so he naturally did not ask further. The others, including Su Ling, also did not ask. The 13th training base had already been activated. Other than the 7th training camp, the students from the other training camps had also arrived. They had come with pride and tenacity. As the true elites of planet Earth, they had gathered together. The true demon special training had also just begun. Chapter 349, 7th Elite Team. The next morning, at the training base of the 13th Spatial Rift, the members of the 7th training camp gathered. They were full of fighting spirit and determination. Even Yang Hui smiled when he saw them. Very good, you all seem to be in a good condition. I can tell from your gazes that all of you have what it takes to be the warriors of planet Earth and the future of planet Earth. I am deeply relieved. However, I still have something to tell you. Although the 13th training base is a training base jointly established by the various training camps, in order to develop better, a Special Forces elite team will still be established. Candidates from every training camp will be selected. After saying this, the students below were stunned for a moment. Zhou Hao, on the other hand, understood that the resources of this training base were limited. Moreover, the front line was currently working hard and needed a group of experts to grow. The best way to grow was for them to keep filtering out the good candidates. It was like one would filter out the finer sand from the rougher sand. Only the filtered candidates will be heavily nurtured. Although it seemed a little unfair, there was no such thing as fairness in this world. Just like how the few of them had participated in the training camp, they had also been filtered out among so many students. In fact, Zhou Hao agreed with this idea very much. The human race's war situation was very tense. It was not easy for them to obtain the 13th spatial rift, although it did mean that they could now take a breather. However, the higher UPS would not really relax. The purpose of establishing this training base was also to speed up the growth of these students. In this elite team, 6 people will be selected from each training camp to form a special elite team. These students will have more cultivation resources and will also be required to face more danger. And these 6 people will also represent our 7th training camp to compete with the other 6 training camps. Right now, you can decide amongst yourselves which 6 people you want to pick. Or, you can directly compete in a martial arts competition. I have no objections. After Yang Hui finished speaking, the students present were stunned. They took a deep breath and looked around. Instructor Yang Hui had handed over the control to the students. Many of the students knew that their strength was not enough, so they simply quit. I'm not strong enough, I won't compete for the 6 spots. Me too. And me. They were not stupid. Zhou Hao, Su Ling, Yuan Cheng, Yun Yan, Zhang Yi and the others all had the top rankings. Moreover, their cultivation levels were indeed very powerful. They had all stepped into the master level. Among them, Su Ling's cultivation was about to break through to the Grand Master level. As for Zhou Hao, although his cultivation was only at the master level, his combat talent and his unpredictable saber techniques made them feel inferior. Soon, there were not many people left on the battlefield. Only Zhou Hao and the others in the top 10 were left. I quit. I'm the weakest among us. Although I don't want to admit it, I still have to say. Me too, I'll quit. Lei Jinpeng and Zhang Shuo sighed. Originally, they had come from the Yanjing training camp and were all blessed by the heavens. However, after training with Zhou Hao and the others, they realized that their talent was simply not worth mentioning. Zhou Hao was a combat genius with combat techniques that far surpassed his peers. There was also Su Ling, who had awakened her ice muscle body bloodline and also had a rapidly growing cultivation. However, this was not the only thing that made them feel helpless. The person who affected them the most was Zhang Yi. Zhang Yi's cultivation level was ordinary and he did not have especially high talent. However, he was too hard-working. He spent all the money he saved to buy cultivation resources and cultivated day and night. To be honest, Lei Jinpeng and Zhang Shuo did not think much of losing to Zhou Hao, Su Ling, and the others. However, they were completely convinced by losing to Zhang Yi. With Lei Jinpeng and Zhang Shuo's withdrawal, only 6 people remained. They were Zhou Hao, Su Ling, Yuan Cheng, Yun Yan, Zhang Yi, and Fang Yu. The 6 of them would eventually represent the 7th training camp and become the 7th elite team. Yang Hui saw this and nodded. He was not too surprised by this outcome. He believed that even if a competition was held, it would still be the same outcome. And now, he had let these students choose them themselves because he wanted them to know others and themselves. Only in this way would they be able to recognize their own strengths and work harder. Only then would they not end up becoming proud and arrogant. I know many of you might not be feeling too good. If that's the case, then work hard. As long as you can defeat these 6 people, you can join the elite team at any time. With that said, Yang Hui directly threw the 6 nameplates to them. These are your nameplates and represent your identities as members of the elite team. Don't lose them. The points in here are very important to you. Zhou Hao and the others held this in their hands and directly entered the software inside. Although it was called a software, it was actually also a points exchange interface. However, when they saw this exchange interface, the 6 of them were shocked. The higher UPS had indeed spent a lot of money. Not only had they turned the 13th spatial rift into a training base, but they had also specially opened a supernatural mall to them. In other words, as long as they had enough points, they could buy anything that was at the supernatural level. This was really a surprise. What a pleasant surprise! Although the items on it were very expensive, it had to be said that the temptation was really huge. Just as they were feeling shocked, more than 10 planes suddenly flew out of the entire 13th training base. The dozen or so planes pulled a huge screen together and placed it in the most conspicuous spot in the 13th spatial rift. Then, the words appeared on the big screen. It was a huge ranking. This was the ranking of the 7 elite teams. Zhou Hao, Su Ling, and the others were also surprisingly ranked on it. Behind their names were points and cultivation levels. However, everyone was currently short on points and did not have any rankings. In front of you are the member list of the 7 elite teams. Your immediate rankings will appear on the screen. You will be given a reward every month according to the rankings. Therefore, this not only concerns your reputation, but also your cultivation resources. Therefore, the 6 of you, don't disappoint us, understand? Yang Hui looked at Zhou Hao and the others with anticipation in his eyes. He did not know if these few fellows could still create miracles. Their 7th training camp was established late and they were also weaker than the students of the other training camps. For example, there were several grandmasters in the first training camp. There were even 2 who had reached the threshold of becoming a supernatural expert. The other teams also had grandmasters, but their 7th training camp did not. This was both pressure and motivation. Yang Hui believed that only under pressure could their potential be stimulated, and he also completely trusted these 6 little guys. Chapter 350, Instructor by Linglong. After saying this, Yang Hui continued. You guys will represent the 7th training camp. However, from today onwards, I won't be training the 6 of you anymore. There will be a quasi-heaven realm expert leading a team to teach you guys. Now, the 6 of you can go to the 13th spatial rift. That senior is already waiting for you. Yang Hui smiled at this moment and looked at Zhou Hao and the others. He did not feel any reluctance. Instead, he was looking forward to seeing what they would accomplish. Zhou Hao and Su Ling took a deep breath, bowed deeply to Yang Hui, and walked directly into the 13th spatial rift. At the same time, batches of 6 people from the other 6 special training camps also rushed out. Their eyes were also filled with determination as they headed towards the 13th spatial rift. The 13th spatial rift was filled with human strongholds. In this spatial rift, a huge building was built with 6 flags. Each side had a number written from 1 to 7. And below the flags stood a woman. This woman was very beautiful and had an extremely powerful cultivation. As she stood there, the surrounding void trembled slightly. A quasi-heaven realm expert. A peak level 9th grade supernatural expert. A true expert who could enter the heaven realm with just half a step. Zhou also knew this person. The moment he saw her, Zhou's face trembled. If not for the fact that there were so many people here, he would have cursed. That's right, this person was Bai Linglong. Bai Linglong saw the 7 elite teams arrive as they lined up in a row. Her expression was still indifferent, and her devastatingly beautiful face did not have the slightest expression. From today onwards, I'm the instructor responsible for teaching all 42 of you. Let me introduce myself. My name is Bai Linglong. You can just call me Instructor Bai. Hello, Instructor Bai. The 7 teams shouted in unison. Bai Linglong nodded and said, I don't care which training camp you come from, but if you come to me, you have to undergo my training. I'm not your original instructor and don't know any of you. Therefore, don't worry, I'll be absolutely fair and won't side with any of you. However, remember one thing. I don't know any of you, and I won't give you any face. If you're not strong enough, immediately quit the elite team. I definitely won't be soft-hearted. Similarly, don't blame me for being ruthless if you don't meet the training goals I set. With that said, Bai Linglong waved her hand. There are 700 foreign races ahead, and their cultivation levels are all at the master level. There are 100 of them in each team. I want you to kill them all. If you can't kill them all, don't come back. Bai Linglong shouted coldly. As soon as she finished speaking, these students were immediately dumbfounded. There were 100 of them. They were only masters and it was already good enough for them to fight one. 100 of them at once was not a small number. Hearing this, the faces of Yuan Cheng, Yun Yan, and the others immediately turned pale. Even Su Ling became nervous. Although they had been on the battlefield before, it was the first time they had to fight so many mutated beasts. Naturally, the pressure was huge. On the other hand, Zhou did not care at all. He was just a little depressed. It was not good for Bai Linglong to be their head instructor. If she recognized him, wouldn't it be over? However, this woman was really ruthless. As soon as they met, she began training without saying anything. Moreover, such high-intensity training was really a little domineering. What should we do? What should we do? There are so many mutated beasts. If we fight alone, we won't be able to resolve them at all. Therefore, we have to think of a good solution. At this moment, Yun Yan was the first to speak. After she finished speaking, Su Ling nodded. That's right. I think that Instructor Bai did not ask us to fight alone when she asked us to kill so many mutated beasts. Instead, she probably wanted us to work together. Only by being united will we have hope. Su Ling also thought so, and Yuan Cheng, Zhang Yi, and the others naturally nodded. Although that's the case, what exactly are we supposed to do? Fang Yu bit her red lip, her expression becoming a little nervous. Zhou looked at them and thought for a moment before saying. Our cultivation level has reached a certain level. Our only advantage is that we are united. In that case, how should we unleash our combat strength to the limit? I think there's only one way. We all need to utilize all of our strengths. Zhou also analyzed. As soon as he spoke, they all agreed. First of all, although my combat strength is not the highest, I have rich combat experience. Therefore, it shouldn't be a problem for me to take the lead. As for Su Ling, your cultivation level is the highest. Not only do we need you to kill these mutated beasts, but you also have to help the others. Yuan Cheng is good at escaping. If we can't defeat them, we'll rely on you to help us escape. Zhang Yi's combat strength is also very strong. You will follow behind Su Ling and be in charge of the feints and last hits. As for Yun Yan and Fang Yu, the two of you should stay together. One of you will hold most of our killing weapons and attack them when the opportunity arises. The other will be in charge of observing everything and taking charge of the entire situation. Zhou Hao had the talent of a leader. After he finished making the arrangements, the few of them nodded. They were very impressed by Zhou Hao's arrangements. Not far away, Bai Linglong also heard Zhou Hao's arrangement and nodded. The reason why she had them kill 100 mutated beasts today was to hone their cooperation. After all, only super experts could afford to fight alone. At their level, they naturally had to rely on teamwork. Only by working together could there be endless hope. Moreover, they all had their own strengths and weaknesses. If they gathered together, they could make up for each other's weaknesses. However, she did not expect Zhou Hao to even think of an escape plan. Looking at Zhou Hao, Bai Linglong smiled faintly. However, for some reason, she suddenly frowned because she felt a familiar feeling from him. That feeling was very strange. It was clearly the first time she had seen him. What's going on? Bai Linglong was puzzled. At this moment, the 7 teams were also ready. Bai Linglong did not say anything else. She clasped her hands and sent them directly to the 7 areas of the 13th spatial rift. In each area, there were 100 master-level beasts. As for Bai Linglong, she took out her spear, which was flashing with a cold light, prepared to attack at any moment. As a quasi-heaven realm expert, it was really too easy for her to kill the other mutated beasts of the master realm with a single strike. That was why she was confident that she could give Zhou Hao and the others such a difficult mission. This was because she knew that only under super high pressure could their potential be stimulated. She had nothing to teach them. Only by experiencing a true battle to the death could they grow faster.